section will discuss other forms of art you may wish to employ in math class. Previously, we've only looked at visual art. This section will cover writing, reading, and music. How can we incorporate writing into math class? We can do this in two ways I'll demonstrate here. We can craft mini narratives based on a mathematical scenario, or we can have students craft more sophisticated written responses than they're possibly used to, namely in the form of a letter. Let's start with crafting mini narratives. This activity is called graphing stories. Students are to match and eventually craft their own stories to a particular graph, like a distance versus time graph. In our setup here, we have three possible stories to go with this distance versus time graph. Which one does the graph best represent? Once you get some practice with this, you can include other mathematical representations along with scenarios such as tables. Eventually, we would love for students to start crafting their own graphs and their own stories. Here's a website I like very much called Graphing Stories. Google it. Students view a scenario and then do a freehand drawing of a graph based on the scenario. For example, the height of a person climbing up a slide, then sliding down. What does the graph look like? If you'd like to include numbers, go right ahead, or just sketch it. That's fine too. As students get familiar with this idea, you can have them create stories based on a graph. Have them compare stories. There are infinitely many valid possibilities. Another possibility is to create a more robust writing ask of students. From the generic explain your answer to the more sophisticated write a letter to a business. From show your work to describe your method to a parent, offering a specific audience. Your English teaching colleagues will love you. Move from worksheets of problem answers to more sophisticated forms of the written word and written communication. It can be typed or handwritten. What about reading? There have never been more accessible math-centric books than right now. Here are a few. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime is an immensely popular novel about a child who sees the world through mathematics. The child has a form of autism, and much of the books he spends solving math puzzles in his mind. It's also a very popular Broadway musical. Math Girls by Hiroshi Yuki is a great book that combines all the fun of math with all the fun of teen romance. You have to check it out. You just have to. There's a whole series of these as well. Lastly, there are accessible nonfiction texts that show how math is a part of everyday life. How Not to Be Wrong by Jordan Ellenberg is one such book. The book is separated into chapters that act as sort of standalone sections, so you can assign a single section and have a book study or discussion in your math class. This might help more students see themselves as having access to math because they're seeing it in these highly engaging, highly applicable scenarios. From everything from why should you miss more flights based on math to how World War II engineers were getting things wrong because they didn't understand math. Jordan Ellenberg's How Not to Be Wrong, really great mathematical nonfiction text that anyone can access. Music and math are inextricably linked. The American Mathematical Society has a library of resources that show how math and music go together. If you have musicians in your classroom, whether they know it or not, they are practicing mathematics. And this might be stretching the purposes of this video, but I'll be honest. I really, really love working complex math to the tune of no vocals music. In fact, I wrote this script for this video to the sound of the extremely popular YouTube and Spotify channel Lo-Fi Hip-Hop Music Beats to Relax/Study to. If students are okay with it, put this station on in your class while they're working, maybe on some of the tasks that have been presented in this video. You'll be amazed at how this can spur creativity for the brain.